The hand came from nowhere. One second I was balancing a tray of crystal flutes filled with champagne worth more than my rent. The next I felt the burning sting across my cheek so sharp it knocked my head sideways. The tray crashed. Glass exploded across the Italian marble like 1,000 tiny screams. "You filthy, clumsy—" Mrs. Park's voice dripped with venom as she stood over me in her $10,000 gown, her manicured hand still raised. Around us, the entire Seoul philanthropic gala froze. 200 of Korea's wealthiest elites turned to stare at the poor African waitress bleeding from a cut on her palm, kneeling in champagne and shattered glass. My name is Zara, and this was supposed to be just another shift, just another night of being invisible to people who wouldn't notice me if I disappeared. But they didn't know what I was wearing under my black service uniform, a platinum engagement ring hidden on a chain beneath my shirt, given to me 3 months ago by a man whose name makes grown men kneel, and he was standing in this room right now. If you want to know how a waitress became the most dangerous woman in Seoul, stay with me. And if you've ever been underestimated, humiliated, or made to feel small, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button, because this story is for everyone who's ever been counted out, and there are more stories like this coming that you won't want to miss. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Let's build a community of people who refuse to stay invisible. But before I tell you what happened next in that ballroom, and before I show you how everything changed in a single moment, you need to understand something. You need to know the question that kept me awake at night, the question that haunted me from the moment I said yes to that ring. How does someone like me, broke, alone, invisible, end up engaged to a man who controls half of Seoul? How does a woman with nothing become the one thing a king is afraid to lose? The answer starts 6 months earlier, when my life was completely, utterly different. I'd moved to Seoul from Nairobi with nothing but a dream and a suitcase that had seen better days. The latches were broken, held together with rope my youngest sister had tied for me the night before I left. Inside were 3 changes of clothes, a photo of my mother, a nursing textbook from a course I'd never finished, and hope. So much hope, it felt heavy. The dream was simple, maybe foolish. Make enough money to finish my nursing degree, send money home to my sisters, build a life that my mother would have been proud of. She'd passed 2 years before, and I'd made her a promise at her bedside in the hospital that couldn't save her. The same hospital where she'd worked for 20 years before they let her go for being too sick, too slow, too expensive to keep. I promised I wouldn't give up. I promised I'd make something of myself, no matter how hard it got. I promised I'd take care of my sisters the way she'd taken care of everyone else. Seoul wasn't kind to dreamers like me. I'd chosen Korea because a girl from my neighborhood had gone there and sent back photos of herself in nice clothes, standing in front of gleaming buildings. She'd made it sound possible. Like if you just worked hard enough, the city would reward you. What she hadn't mentioned were the parts that break you, the loneliness, the discrimination, the grinding, relentless exhaustion that becomes your normal until you can't remember what it felt like to not be tired. I spoke broken Korean, the kind that made locals wince when I tried to order food. I'd learned from an app on my phone and a tattered textbook I'd bought at a street market in Nairobi. But textbook Korean and real Korean were completely different languages. I'd ask for directions and people would pretend not to hear me. I'd try to make small talk with neighbors and they'd hurry past like I carried a disease. I had no family here, no connections, no safety net to catch me if I fell. What I had were 3 jobs that barely kept me afloat and a rooftop room in Itaewon that leaked every time it rained. The landlord had promised to fix it. That was 4 months ago. Now I just kept buckets strategically placed around the room, listening to the rhythmic drip, drip, drip that marked time like a metronome. I'd lie awake at night, listening to water drip into those buckets, and wonder if this was what my mother had imagined for me. If this was the life she'd sacrificed for, worked herself to death for. The room was barely big enough for a mattress on the floor. There was no kitchen, just a hot plate I'd bought secondhand. The bathroom was shared with 3 other tenants, and you had to time your showers for when the water was actually hot. But it was mine, my first home away from home. And some nights, when I wasn't too exhausted, I'd sit by the small window that looked out over the Seoul skyline and tell myself it was temporary. Just temporary. By day, I worked at a hotel laundry in Gangnam, my hands raw from bleach and scalding water. The chemical smell would cling to my skin for hours after my shift ended, no matter how many times I washed. It would seep into my hair, my clothes, my pores. I'd scrub luxury linens that cost more than my monthly rent, standing in front of industrial machines in a basement that never saw sunlight. The heat was unbearable in summer, the air thick and wet, like breathing through a towel. My supervisor was a woman named Mrs. Cho, middle-aged and bitter, who seemed to take personal offense to my existence. She'd watch me like a hawk, timing my bathroom breaks, criticizing the way I folded sheets, docking my pay for imagined infractions. Once, she made me rewash an entire load because she said she could smell my foreign smell on the fabric. I'd stood there, humiliated, while the other workers pretended not to notice. By evening, I cleaned office buildings in the financial district, pushing a cart through empty corridors while the city's professionals went home to their families. I'd empty their trash cans filled with half-eaten lunches they'd thrown away, food that could have fed me for days. I'd wipe down their desks, vacuum their floors, clean their bathrooms. Sometimes they'd work late and I'd have to clean around them. They never looked at me, never said hello or thank you. I was furniture to them, background noise. There was one man, a young executive, who'd leave his dirty coffee cups everywhere. On his desk, on the windowsill, the floor, like he was testing me, seeing how much mess I'd tolerate. One night I counted 17 cups scattered around his office. 17. Each one with a ring of dried coffee at the bottom, some with mold growing inside. I'd clean them all without a word because I needed this job. Because I couldn't afford to make waves. By night, I served at high-end events for a catering company that paid the best, but treated us like we were disposable. Like we were nothing. The company was called Elite Events, which was ironic because there was nothing elite about how they treated their staff. We were the bottom rung, the invisible army that made rich people's parties possible. The work was grueling. We'd stand for 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours straight in cheap shoes that destroyed our feet. We'd carry heavy trays, smile until our faces hurt, absorb insults and wandering hands and the casual cruelty of people who'd never had to work for anything in their lives. The dress code was strict. Black uniform, hair pulled back, minimal jewelry, no perfume. We had to be present but invisible, there but not really there. My coworkers were mostly other immigrants. Filipino women who sent every penny home to their children. Vietnamese men working their way through university. A Mongolian woman named Tuya who'd become something like a friend. We'd share food during our brief breaks, compare notes on which clients were the worst, dream about the lives we'd have someday when we weren't so tired. Tuya was the one who'd warned me about Mrs. Park. "That woman is poison," she'd said one night during a wedding reception watching Mrs. Park berate a server for breathing too loudly near her table. She complained once that a waiter's skin was too dark and it was ruining her appetite. Got him fired on the spot. I'd filed that information away, made a mental note to avoid her at all costs. But you can't always avoid poison. Sometimes it finds you anyway. I was tired. Always tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes you forget what it feels like to wake up rested. I'd sleep through my alarms, jolt awake in a panic, rush to my first job still half dreaming. My body ached constantly, my feet, my back, my shoulders. I developed a persistent cough from the chemicals at the laundry. My hands cracked and bled from the constant washing and cleaning. But I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that every night as I fell asleep, me still wearing my work clothes because I was too exhausted to change. Temporary. Just Temporary. I'd save enough money eventually. I'd finish my nursing degree. I'd bring my sisters to Korea, or go back to Nairobi with enough money to start fresh. I just had to survive long enough. I'd been in Seoul for 8 months when I met him. 8 months of grinding poverty and loneliness. 8 months of eating ramen for dinner and skipping meals to save money. 8 months of being invisible. Then everything changed. It was a Thursday night, or maybe Friday morning. Time blurred together when you worked the hours I did. I was leaving a late-night shift at the Imperial Hotel, my feet aching in cheap shoes that were falling apart. The sole of my left shoe had come loose and made a flapping sound when I walked. I'd tried to glue it back, but the glue kept failing. I needed new shoes, but new shoes cost money I didn't have. It was past 3 in the morning. The underground parking garage was empty, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting everything in that sickly yellow glow that made everyone look corpse-like. I was thinking about the leftover rice waiting for me at home, about whether I had enough money for the subway, or if I'd have to walk the 40 minutes back to Itaewon in my broken shoes. My phone had 17 left on it. Not enough for the subway. Walking it was. That's when I saw him. A man slumped against a black sedan in the VIP section of the garage where I'd never been, where security usually kept people like me out. The car was a Mercedes, sleek and expensive, the kind of vehicle that cost more than I'd make in 5 years. The license plate was a single digit. I didn't know much about Korean culture yet, but I knew single-digit plates meant serious money, serious power. His white shirt was soaked with blood, dark and spreading across his side like a blooming flower. The blood had soaked through to his jacket, dripped onto the concrete beneath him. His breathing was shallow, rapid, the kind of breathing that means shock, blood loss, not much time. His eyes were half closed, and for a second I thought he might already be dead. I should have run. Any sane person would have. This was Seoul, and you didn't get involved in things that weren't your business. You especially didn't get involved when there was blood and expensive cars and the kind of silence that meant danger. This wasn't my world. This wasn't my problem. But I'd grown up watching my mother care for strangers who showed up at our door in the middle of the night. Nairobi could be violent, unpredictable. People would arrive bleeding, desperate, afraid. And my mother never turned anyone away. She'd been a nurse, a real one, before the hospital let her go. She used to say that medicine wasn't a choice, it was a calling. That when you saw someone hurting, you helped. Even if it cost you. Even if it scared you. Even if it put you at risk. Nursing was in my blood, even if I'd never finished school, even if I was just a cleaning woman now. I'd completed 2 years of nursing school in Nairobi before my mother got sick and the money ran out. I knew enough to be dangerous, my instructors used to joke. Enough to help or enough to hurt, depending on what I did with it. So I rushed over, my heart hammering against my ribs, my hands shaking as I dropped my bag and pressed my scarf against the wound in his side. The fabric turned red instantly, warm and wet. The blood was bright, arterial. Not good. The wound was deep, probably from a knife. Clean edges. Someone had known what they were doing. "Stay with me," I whispered in English, then fumbled through my terrible Korean, the words coming out wrong, desperate. "Don't close your eyes. Please don't close your eyes. I need you to stay awake." He looked at me then. Really looked. And that's when I realized my first assessment had been completely wrong. His eyes were dark, sharp, completely aware despite the blood loss. There was no confusion, no fear, no pain in those eyes. Just calculation. Cold, precise calculation. In that moment, I realized something that sent ice through my veins. He wasn't dying. He was deciding. Deciding whether to let me help him or not. Deciding what to do with me now that I'd seen him like this. Now that I was a witness to whatever had happened. I'd stumbled into something bad. "You're not afraid," he said in perfect English, with barely an accent. His voice was deep, calm, almost amused. Like he found something funny about this whole situation. Like bleeding out in a parking garage was mildly entertaining. I am, I admitted, pressing harder on the wound. I could feel his blood, hot and sticky, seeping through my scarf and onto my hands. But you're bleeding. You need help. Why? The question was strange, philosophical, like he genuinely wanted to know why I'd stopped. Because you're hurt. People get hurt every day. You don't stop for all of them. Maybe I should. I was shaking now, adrenaline flooding my system. Can you stand? We need to get you to a hospital. He studied me for a long moment. His gaze moved across my face like he was memorizing it, cataloging every detail. My skin tone, my features, my accent, my cheap uniform. Putting together the puzzle of who I was and why I was here. I could almost see him filing the information away. Then he nodded once, a small movement that somehow felt like permission, like I'd passed some kind of test I hadn't known I was taking. I helped him into the back seat of the sedan, his weight heavy against me. He was tall, well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who took up space without trying. Despite the blood loss, he moved with a kind of controlled grace. Like a predator conserving energy. His hand gripped my shoulder for support, and I felt the strength in it, the barely restrained power. I told him I was taking him to the hospital, already planning the route in my head. Severance Hospital was closest, maybe 15 minutes away. No, he said. The single word was firm, final. You need a doctor, I looked at the wound, at the blood still seeping through my scarf. You could die. No hospital. He gave me an address in Gangnam, rattling off numbers I barely caught. Drive. I don't have a license, I said. It seemed important to mention. I don't know how to drive. You know which pedal makes it go and which makes it stop? He was leaning back against the leather seat, his hand pressed against his side. Yes, but... Then you know how to drive. Keys are in the ignition. I stared at him through the rearview mirror. This was insane. This was beyond insane. I should get out of this car, call an ambulance, let someone qualified handle this. But something in his eyes told me that calling an ambulance would be a mistake, that involving the authorities would put both of us in danger. So I got behind the wheel. The car was nicer than anything I'd ever been inside. Leather seats, a dashboard that looked like a spaceship control panel, that new car smell mixed with the copper tang of blood. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. It took me 3 tries to figure out how to adjust the seat so my feet reached the pedals. You're doing fine, he said from the back seat. His voice was steady, encouraging even. Like this was a driving lesson and not a life-or-death emergency. I drove his car through the neon-lit streets of Seoul like I'd stolen it, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The city was still alive at this hour. Bars spilling drunken laughter onto sidewalks, convenience stores glowing like beacons, street vendors packing up their carts. I ran 2 red lights. I didn't care. A taxi honked at me when I cut him off. I barely noticed. In the rearview mirror, I could see him in the back seat, staying conscious through what looked like sheer willpower. His jaw was clenched, his hand pressed against his side. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped. His white shirt was ruined, completely soaked through. What happened? I asked. Then immediately regretted it. You don't ask questions. Each rule number 1 of surviving in a foreign city. You don't ask questions. Business disagreement. His voice was tight with pain but still controlled. Still amused somehow. Some disagreement. The other guy looks worse. I didn't know if he was joking. I didn't want to know. The address led to a towering glass building in the heart of Gangnam, the wealthy district where I'd only ever gone to clean. The building was modern, sleek, at least 40 stories of dark glass and steel that reflected the city lights. There was no sign, no indication of what the building was for. just an address and an intimidating presence. Before I could even stop the car properly, before I could figure out how to put it in park, men in black suits swarmed us. They came from nowhere, the building entrance, the shadows, the street. At least a dozen of them. Moving with military precision, coordinated like they'd done this before. They pulled him out of the back seat with practiced efficiency, one man on each side supporting his weight. Another was already on a phone, barking orders in rapid Korean too fast for me to follow. A fourth approached my window, his face expressionless. "Go home," he said in English. "Forget this happened." I thought that was the end. I'd never see him again. This would just be a strange story I'd tell myself sometimes, wondering if it had really happened or if I'd imagined the whole thing. A fever dream brought on by exhaustion and chemical fumes. But as they carried him toward the entrance, he turned his head and looked back at me. Our eyes met through the car window. His face was pale from blood loss, but his eyes were still sharp, still aware, neat, still calculating. "Your name?" he called out. The men carrying him paused, surprised. Clearly, this wasn't normal procedure. "Zara?" I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended. He smiled. It was a small, dangerous smile that didn't reach his eyes, the kind of smile that promised consequences, though I couldn't tell if they'd be good or bad. "I'll remember." Then they carried him inside and the glass doors closed behind them. One of the men in black suits gestured for me to leave. I sat there for a moment, my hands still gripping the steering wheel, my heart still racing, blood all over my clothes and hands. Then I got out of the car, leaving the keys in the ignition, and walked to the nearest subway station. My broken shoe flapped with every step. I didn't care. I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks. I went back to my life, back to my 3 jobs and my leaking room. I tried to forget about it, about him. I washed his blood out of my scarf in the communal bathroom, scrubbing until the water ran clear. I threw away my uniform shirt because the blood wouldn't come out. I told myself to forget about it, about him. Men like that didn't exist in the same world as women like me. Whatever had happened that night was over, but I couldn't stop thinking about it, about him, about the way he'd looked at me with those calculating eyes, about the smile that promised he'd remember, about the feeling that I'd stepped into something much bigger than a simple good deed. Tuya noticed I was distracted at work. "You okay?" she asked during a wedding reception, both of us carrying trays of champagne through crowds of drunk guests. "You seem different." "I'm fine," I lied. "Man trouble?" She grinned. "Please tell me you met someone. You need romance in your life, Zara. All this work is making you old before your time." I forced a laugh. "No man trouble, just tired." But I was lying. I couldn't stop wondering about him. Who was he? What kind of business left you bleeding in a parking garage? Why had he smiled like that? And why did part of me, a stupid, reckless part, want to see him again? I went back to the Imperial Hotel on my next shift and asked around. The staff looked at me like I was crazy when I described the car, the man, the blood. No one would tell me anything directly, but I saw the fear in their eyes, the way they'd glance around before changing the subject, the way conversations would die when I walked into a room. One older security guard finally pulled me aside in the parking garage, in the same place I'd found him bleeding. The guard was in his 60s, with kind eyes and a limp from an old injury. "Stay away from him," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked around like someone might be listening. "That man is not someone you want to know." "Who is he?" The guard hesitated. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something like pity in his eyes. Then he said, "Kang Jiwon. He runs half of Seoul, the half the police don't talk about." My blood went cold. I'd heard whispers about men like that. The invisible kings who controlled the city from the shadows. Men who owned politicians and police officers, who decided which businesses succeeded and which burned down, who made people disappear without a trace. What does that mean? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. It means he's dangerous. It means people who cross him end up in the Han River. It means you should forget you ever met him. The guard put a hand on my shoulder. Go home, girl. Find a nice boy who works at a bank or a coffee shop. Stay away from monsters, even if they smile at you. But my heart, my stupid, stubborn heart, didn't listen. 3 days later, Jiwon showed up at my work. I was scrubbing floors in an office building at 2 in the morning, my knees aching, my back screaming. The building was in the financial district, 43 floors of corporate offices that I cleaned from midnight to 6 a.m. I was on the 32nd floor, alone in a hallway of empty offices. The building was silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the occasional creak of the structure settling. I looked up from the floor I was scrubbing and saw him standing in the hallway, watching me. He was wearing a black suit that probably cost more than my entire existence. The wound was healed, or at least hidden. He looked completely different from the man I'd found bleeding in a parking garage. This man was polished, powerful, in control. His presence filled the entire space, making the corridor feel smaller, the air thicker. I froze, my hand still gripping the scrub brush, water dripping onto the floor I'd just cleaned. You're hard to find, he said. His voice was the same, deep, calm, with that undercurrent of amusement. I'm just a cleaner. My voice shook. I stood up slowly, suddenly aware of how I must look. Sweaty, disheveled, on my knees, wearing a uniform that was 2 sizes too big and smelled like industrial cleaner. Why are you here? Because you saved my life and didn't ask for anything. He stepped closer. Each step was measured, deliberate, like a predator approaching prey. That's unusual. I don't want anything from you. I took a step back, bumping into my cleaning cart. Good. He tilted his head, studying me the way he had in the car, like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Then have dinner with me. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound came out harsh, almost hysterical. You're joking. I don't joke. I can't. I have another shift after this. I gestured at my cart, at the hallway of offices still waiting to be cleaned. I work until 6. Not anymore. He pulled out his phone and made one call. Just one. Spoke in rapid Korean for maybe 30 seconds. I watched him, my heart pounding, not understanding most of what he said but catching my name, the building address, something that sounded like money. 30 seconds later, my supervisor called me. Mr. Kim, who'd never called me outside of work before, who barely acknowledged my existence during work. Zara, he said, his voice strange, nervous. Take the night off, paid. Take tomorrow night off, too. Actually, take the rest of the week off, paid. I stared at Jiwon, my phone still pressed to my ear. I don't understand. You don't need to. Mr. Kim sounded scared. Actually scared. Just take the time off. Please. He hung up. What did you do? I asked Jiwon. I bought the building. He said it so casually, like buying a 43-story office building was equivalent to buying a coffee. Well, my company did. This afternoon. So technically, you work for me now. That's... I couldn't find words. That's insane. Is it? He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, expensive, subtle, nothing like the cheap body spray the men I knew wore. You saved my life. I wanted to have dinner with you. This seemed like the simplest solution. You bought a building so you could ask me to dinner? I was going to buy it anyway. The timing worked out. He smiled slightly. Though, if I'm being honest, yes. I expedited the purchase. I don't even know you. Then let's fix that. He held out his hand. My name is Kang Jiwon. I'm 34 years old. I run a security and infrastructure company. I like whiskey, classical music, and people who surprise me. And you, Zara, surprised me. I looked at his outstretched hand. This was crazy. This was beyond crazy. Every instinct I had told me to walk away, to refuse, to keep my safe, boring, predictable life intact. But when was the last time someone had looked at me like I mattered? When was the last time someone had seen me as anything other than furniture, a body to clean their messes and serve their food? I took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, his palm rough with calluses that seemed out of place on a man in a suit, that expensive. "What are you hungry for?" he asked. "Interested," I said. The word came out before I could stop it, bold and reckless. His smile widened. "Me too." That dinner changed everything. He took me to a private restaurant in Itaewon, the kind of place without a sign on the door, where you needed to know someone who knew someone to even find out it existed. The entire place was ours. Every table empty, candles lit, soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. We were the only guests. Silent waiters moved like ghosts, appearing with courses I hadn't ordered, dishes I couldn't pronounce, wine that probably cost more than my rent. I felt completely out of place in my cleaning uniform, but Jiwon didn't seem to notice or care. He'd offered to take me home to change, but I'd refused, too afraid that if I left I'd lose my nerve and never show up. He didn't talk about his work at first. Instead, he asked about mine, about Nairobi, about the markets where my mother used to take me on Saturday mornings, about the smell of rain on red dirt roads and the sound of matatus honking through traffic. He asked about the jacaranda trees that bloomed purple every October, about ugali and sukuma wiki, about my mother's laugh. I didn't tell him everything. Some wounds were too deep to share with a stranger, but I told him enough. About my mother's death from cervical cancer that could have been prevented if she'd had access to better health care, about the promise I'd made at her bedside, about the nursing degree I still dreamed of finishing someday, about how small Seoul made me feel, how invisible. "You're not invisible," he said. "Easy for you to say. You own buildings." "I own a lot of things. Buildings, businesses, the loyalty of people who fear me." He leaned back in his chair, swirling wine in his glass. "But I've never owned anyone's genuine kindness. That's rarer than you think." "Kindness is free?" "No." His voice was firm. "It's not. Kindness costs. Sometimes it costs everything. You risked yourself for a stranger in a parking garage. That wasn't free. That was expensive. You just didn't charge me for it." I didn't know what to say to that. When I asked about him, he was vague. He said he managed investments, security, infrastructure. All technically true, I'd learn later. All carefully chosen lies. He told me he'd grown up in Seoul, that his father had built the company from nothing, that he'd inherited it at 25 when his father died. "How did he die?" I asked. "Violently." He said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. "This business isn't kind to weak men. My father wasn't weak, but he was distracted, made mistakes, trusted the wrong people." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He taught me everything I needed to know before he died. How to survive, how to win, how to make people fear you enough that they don't dare make mistakes." The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. But when he looked at me across that table, when the candlelight caught his face, I didn't see a criminal. I saw a man who was tired of being feared and never known. "You're not afraid of me," he said near the end of the night, after the waiters had cleared the last course. "Should I be?" "Yes." "Why?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something intimate and dangerous. "Because I'm not a good man, Zara. I've done things that would make you run, things I can't take back, things I don't regret." I met his eyes. "Everyone's done things they regret." "Not like me." "Then prove me wrong," I said. The wine had made me bold, reckless. "Be better." Something shifted in his expression. Something I couldn't name but felt in my chest, warm and terrifying. He reached across the table and took my hand, his thumb brushing across my knuckles. You make it sound simple. Maybe it is. It's not. But he didn't let go of my hand. But for you, I'll try. We started seeing each other in secret after that. He'd show up at random times, during my lunch break at the laundry, waiting outside the building I cleaned at night, sending a car to pick me up after my catering shifts. At first, I was nervous, constantly looking over my shoulder, sure that someone would see us and it would cost me my jobs. But Jiwon was careful, discreet. We'd meet in private places, his penthouse, quiet restaurants, late-night drives through the city when the streets were empty. He never told me the full truth of what he did, and I never asked. Part of me didn't want to know. Part of me was afraid that if I knew everything, and I'd have to make a choice I wasn't ready to make. What I saw was a man who was kind to me, who listened when I talked about my day, who remembered details I'd mentioned once in passing, who asked about my sisters back in Nairobi and actually wanted to hear the answers. He was protective in ways that both comforted and unnerved me. When a drunk man groped me during a catering shift, that man's company mysteriously lost all its contracts within a week. When Mrs. Cho at the laundry docked my pay for being 2 minutes late, I received a bonus in my next paycheck that was triple what she'd taken. When my landlord threatened to evict me over the leaking roof, suddenly the entire building was sold, and a new landlord appeared who fixed everything immediately. "Did you do that?" I'd ask. "Do what?" He'd say, all innocence. But I knew. I always knew. 3 weeks in, he paid off my debts without asking. I woke up to an email from the loan company saying my balance was zero. When I confronted him about it, he just shrugged. "You were stressed about it. Now you're not." "Jiwon, that was $3,000. Okay. You can't just—" I didn't know how to finish that sentence. "I need to pay you back." "Why?" "Because I owe you. You saved my life. I paid off some loans. We're not even close to even." He pulled me close, his hand cupping my face. "Besides, I like making your life easier. Let me." 1 month in, he moved me into a new apartment. Not his penthouse. That would have been too obvious. Too much. But a nice place in Mapo. A real apartment with a bedroom and a kitchen and windows that didn't leak. The building had security. An elevator that worked. Ish neighbors who smiled at me in the hallways. "This is too much," I protested when he showed me the place. "It's not enough." He was serious. "You were living in a room that leaked. That's not acceptable." It was fine. It wasn't. His voice was firm. "You deserve better than fine, Zara. You deserve good. Great. You deserve to come home and not have to empty buckets." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. Because he was right. And because it felt good to be cared for. To have someone notice my struggles and want to fix them. I kept 2 of my jobs. The catering and the office cleaning. I quit the laundry because Mrs. Cho had become unbearable and because I could finally afford to. With the new apartment and no debt, I had breathing room for the first time since arriving in Seoul. I started saving money, real money, for my nursing degree, for my sisters, for a future that was starting to feel possible instead of just a dream I'd tell myself to stay sane. And slowly, carefully, I fell in love with him. It wasn't the smart thing to do. It probably wasn't even the right thing. But love doesn't ask permission. It doesn't wait for the right moment. It doesn't care about logic or safety or the warnings from security guards about monsters. I fell in love with the way he'd show up at 3 a.m. after I finished a catering shift, just to make sure I got home safe. The way he'd listen to me talk about my mother and not try to fix it or make it better. Just listen. The way he'd hold me when I cried about missing home, about missing Nairobi, about missing my sisters. I fell in love with the softness he showed me that I suspected no one else got to see. The way he'd fall asleep with his head in my lap while I read, looking almost peaceful, almost young. The way he'd cook breakfast for me on his rare days off, making ugali from a recipe he'd researched because I mentioned missing it. I fell in love with a man who was probably a monster to everyone else, but who looked at me like I was something precious. And that terrified me more than anything else about him. 2 months in, I finally worked up the courage to ask. We were in his penthouse, lying in bed watching the sunrise over Seoul. The view from his bedroom was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River, the city waking up in shades of orange and gold. "What do you actually do?" I asked. "The truth." He was quiet for a long moment. I felt him tense beside me. "Do you really want to know?" "Yes." "Why now?" "Because I love you." The words came out before I could stop them. "And I need to know what I'm loving." He sat up, his back against the headboard. "I run security for businesses who need protection from people like me. I control shipping routes through Busan. I own construction companies that build half the new buildings in Seoul. I decide which politicians get elected and which ones have their secrets exposed. I make people disappear when they become problems." My stomach dropped. "Disappear?" "I don't kill them myself if that's what you're asking. I have people for that." He said it calmly, without emotion, though I have, in the past, when necessary. I should have gotten up, should have left, should have run. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Yes." "Good. You should be." "I'm dangerous, Zara. To everyone. The only reason you're safe is because hurting you would hurt me, and I've built an empire on the foundation that I don't have weaknesses people can exploit." "But I am a weakness." "Yes." He turned to look at me. "You're the only one." "Then why risk it?" "Because for the first time in my life, I want something more than power." His voice was soft. "I want to be known. Really known. Not feared, not obeyed. Known." I reached for his hand. "I know you. You know the part of me I show you. Then show me the rest." He did. Over the next few weeks, he let me in. He told me about the violence, the blood, the choices he'd made, about the man who'd stabbed him, a rival who'd tried to take over his shipping routes, about what had happened to that man afterward, about the bodies in the Han River that police reports called suicides. He told me about his father's death, how it hadn't been an accident or natural causes, how it had been an assassination by business partners who'd thought a 25-year-old wouldn't be able to hold the empire together. How Jiwon had proven them wrong by systematically destroying everyone involved over the course of 2 years. "I ruined them," he said, not quickly, slowly. "I wanted them to see it coming, to know it was me, to understand that you don't kill a king and expect his son to forgive." He told me about the darkness, about the parts of himself that scared even him, about the coldness he could access, the ability to hurt people without feeling anything. "I'm not a good man, Zara. I don't know if I can be." "But you want to be." "For you?" "Yes." And somehow, that was enough. 3 months in, he took me to a private rooftop at sunset. I'd just finished an afternoon shift at the catering company. A birthday party for a CEO's daughter. The kind of over-the-top event where they'd spent more on flowers than most people spent on their weddings. I was exhausted. My feet hurt. I smelled like the kitchen. Jiwon picked me up in his car. Not the Mercedes from that first night, but a different one, equally expensive. He wouldn't tell me where we were going. "I need to change," I'd protested. "You're perfect as you are." We drove to a building I didn't recognize, took a private elevator to the top floor, then climbed a set of stairs to the roof. And there, overlooking the Han River as it caught the last light of the sun, was a table set for two, candles in glass holders, wine chilling in a bucket, the entire city of Seoul spreading out below us in every direction. "When did you plan this?" I asked. "This morning." He pulled out my chair. "I woke up and decided I couldn't wait anymore." "For what?" He didn't answer. We ate dinner as the sun set, as the city lights began to glow, as the Han River turned from gold to silver to dark. We talked about nothing important. A movie I wanted to see, a restaurant he'd heard about, whether it would rain tomorrow. Then, as dessert was being cleared, he pulled out a small black box. My heart stopped. "I know what you're going to say," he began. His hands were steady, but I could see something vulnerable in his eyes, something raw. "That it's too soon, that you don't know everything about me, that I'm dangerous, that this is crazy." My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. "But I need you to know something, Zara." His voice was steady, certain, like he'd practiced these words 100 times. "I've lived my entire life in darkness. I've done terrible things. I've hurt people. I've built an empire on fear and violence. And I was fine with that. I accepted it. I thought that was all I'd ever be." He opened the box. The ring inside was platinum, simple, perfect. Not flashy or ostentatious, just beautiful in its simplicity. A single diamond that caught the light. "Then you stopped for me in a parking garage. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care. You just saw someone hurting and you helped. You risked yourself for a stranger. And I've been trying to understand why. What kind of person does that? And what kind of person sees darkness and chooses light anyway?" Tears were streaming down my face now. "You're the only light I've ever wanted to keep, Zara. The only person who's ever made me want to be better than what I am. And I know I don't deserve you. I know I'm asking you to enter a dangerous world, but I'm asking anyway." He got down on one knee on that rooftop. This man who made others kneel, kneeling for me. "Marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. Let me be your darkness, and let me learn to live in your light. Say yes." I should have asked more questions. I should have demanded guarantees, assurances, exit strategies. I should have been smart and practical and careful. But I loved him. God help me. I loved him with everything I had. Every broken piece of my heart, every dream I'd ever dreamed, every hope I'd ever harbored. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on my finger and pulled me into his arms. I was crying. He might have been too. The city glittered around us like a million watching eyes, and I didn't care. "I love you," I said against his chest. "I know." His voice was rough. "I love you too. More than I knew I could love anything." We stood there as night fell completely, as Seoul transformed into a sea of lights below us. I was wearing a catering uniform and cheap shoes, engaged to a man who ruled the city from the shadows. It was crazy. It was impossible. It was perfect. The next morning, reality set in. "We need to keep this private," Jiwon said over breakfast in his penthouse. For a while, I looked at the ring on my finger, already mourning its loss. "For how long?" "Until I can ensure your safety. There are people who'd use you against me if they knew. Rivals, enemies, people who'd hurt you just to hurt me. I'm not afraid. I am." He took my hand. "I'm terrified, Zara. You're my only weakness. The only thing in this world that could bring me to my knees. I need time to shore up defenses, to make it clear that touching you means death." "That's dramatic." "That's the truth." His eyes were serious. "I've ended people for less. I won't let anything happen to you." So I took off the ring and put it on a chain around my neck, hiding it beneath my clothes. My secret. Our secret. And I went back to my catering jobs because I didn't want to be the woman who gave up everything for a man. I'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to lose myself completely. I needed to keep some part of my old life intact. Some part that was just mine. Jiwon didn't like it, but he understood. "Just promise me you'll quit if anyone mistreats you," he said. "Promise me you'll call if you need help." I promise. I should have quit. Should have walked away from elite events and their terrible clients and their dangerous situations. But I didn't. Because that job was mine. Because I'd earned it. Because it was the last connection to the woman I'd been before Jawan, before Ring, before everything changed. That's how I ended up at the Seoul Philanthropic Gala. It was the biggest event of the year, thrown by some charity organization that raised money for children's hospitals or orphans or something equally photogenic. 400 guests, every one of them worth millions. Billionaires, politicians, actors, nice socialites, the kind of people who shape the country with their money and influence. Elite Events had been planning it for months. They'd hired extra staff, rented additional equipment, brought in a special team of managers to handle the VIP guests. I was assigned to champagne service with Tuya and 3 other servers. Stay invisible, our supervisor warned us during the pre-event briefing. These people don't want to know you exist. Just keep the champagne flowing and don't make eye contact unless they speak to you first. I kept my head down and did my job. I'd gotten good at being invisible over the years. It was a survival skill. Smile politely, move efficiently, anticipate needs before they're spoken, disappear into the background. The gala was held at the Shilla Hotel, in their grand ballroom that could hold 1,000 people. Crystal chandeliers, Italian marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul. An orchestra played classical music. The champagne we served cost more than my monthly rent per bottle. I'd been working for 2 hours, my feet aching in the regulation black heels when I saw him. Jiwon was across the ballroom, wearing a black tuxedo that made him look even more imposing than usual. He was talking to someone important, a politician whose face I recognized from news reports. He looked comfortable in this world, commanding. This was his element. Our eyes met across the crowd. Just for a second. His expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Concern, maybe. Possessiveness. I looked away quickly, heat flooding my cheeks. Focused on my tray of champagne, on not thinking about the ring hidden beneath my uniform, pressing against my heart. That's when I encountered Mrs. Park. She was holding court near the south windows, surrounded by other wealthy women in designer gowns. She was wearing something that looked like it cost more than a car, covered in crystals that caught the light. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo. Her jewelry was excessive. Rings on every finger, a diamond necklace that probably had its own security detail. I'd been warned about her by the other servers. "That's Mrs. Park," Tuya had whispered. "Stay away from her if you can. She's poison." But avoiding her wasn't always possible. When she signaled for champagne, I had to approach. I offered her a glass from my tray, keeping my eyes down, my smile professional. She waved me away like I was filth, like I'd offended her by breathing the same air. "Get that away from me." "Of course, ma'am." I stepped back quickly. But another server was right behind me, not paying attention. We collided. My tray tilted. Just a fraction. Just for a second. A single drop of champagne splashed onto her gown. One drop. That's all it took. She turned on me like I'd attacked her. Her face contorted with rage, her eyes narrowing into slits. "You ruined it! You clumsy, stupid girl! Do you know how much this costs? Do you have any idea?" "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I can—" The slap came before I could finish. Her hand connected with my cheek so hard my head snapped to the side. The sound echoed through the ballroom. Everything stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Music faltered. 400 people turned to stare. The tray crashed from my hands. Glass exploded across the Italian marble like 1,000 tiny screams, crystal shards scattering in every direction. My cheek burned. I touched it and felt blood. Her ring, a massive diamond on her right hand, had cut me. A sharp line of pain that brought tears to my eyes. My ears rang from the impact. My vision blurred at the edges. But I didn't cry. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. I wouldn't give any of them that satisfaction. "Get out," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You don't belong here. You never belonged here. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of." I looked around the room at the faces staring at me. Pity, disgust, indifference, entertainment. No one moved. No one helped. This was a show to them. The poor African girl getting what she deserved for daring to exist in their world. My supervisor was making his way over, his face apologetic but resigned. He'd fire me, probably, to appease Mrs. Park, to keep the client happy. That's how these things worked. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, commanding. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and Jiwon walked through. The ballroom fell into absolute silence. Even the orchestra stopped playing. 400 people held their breath, because everyone recognized him. Everyone knew who he was, and everyone suddenly understood that something was about to happen. He was dressed in a black tuxedo that fit him like armor. His expression was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that comes before a storm, before everything breaks. The kind of calm that means someone is about to pay a price. I'd never seen him like this before, in public, in his world, using the full weight of his power. He stopped in front of me and crouched down, ignoring the broken glass, ignoring the champagne soaking into his expensive shoes, ignoring the gasps from the crowd. His hand cupped my face gently, tilting it toward the light so he could see the cut on my cheek. His thumb brushed just below the wound, careful not to hurt me. "Are you hurt?" His voice was soft, intimate, only for me. I shook my head, unable to speak. My throat had closed up completely. Everything I wanted to say, "I'm fine, it's okay, don't make a scene," died in my throat. He stood slowly, deliberately, and turned to Mrs. Park. The entire room held its breath. You could have heard a pin drop. The tension was suffocating. "Apologize," he said quietly. His voice was calm, controlled, but it carried across the silent ballroom. Mrs. Park laughed. It was a sharp, nervous sound that didn't quite land right. "Excuse me, do you know who I am?" "I do." His tone didn't change, didn't rise, didn't need to. "You're Mrs. Park. Your husband runs Park Industries, real estate development. Your family has old money, 2 generations of it. You sit on 3 charity boards. You're known for your extravagant parties and your cruel tongue." She blinked, surprised that he knew so much about her. "Now apologize to my fiancé." The word landed like a bomb. Whispers erupted across the ballroom, spreading like wildfire. People pulled out their phones. Cameras flashed. The news would be everywhere within minutes. Mrs. Park's face went white, then red, then white again. "Your... what? Your fiancé? Or... this girl is... her name is Zara." Juwan's voice was still calm, but now it carried an edge, sharp as a knife. "And yes, she's mine." He reached down and pulled the chain from beneath my uniform. The platinum ring caught the light, spinning slowly. His ring. The one everyone in this room would recognize, because everyone knew that Kang Jiwon didn't do anything casually. If he'd given me a ring, it meant something. "This woman is mine," he said, each word precise and final. "And you just put your hands on her." Mrs. Park stumbled backward, her hand going to her mouth. "I didn't know. I couldn't have known. If I'd known, that's your problem." He turned to the security guard standing frozen by the entrance, unsure whether to intervene. "Remove her." "You can't," Mrs. Park said, but her voice had lost all its venom. Now she just sounded scared. Actually scared. You own nothing." Jiwon's voice was still calm, still controlled, but now it carried the weight of absolute authority, of a man who wasn't making threats but stating facts. "I own this hotel. I own the event company that organized this gala. I own the building you're standing in. I own the company your husband works for. As of 3 hours ago, when I completed the acquisition. So technically, Mrs. Park, you work for me." The room gasped. Mrs. Park's face went ashen. "You're banned from every property, business, and establishment I control," Jiwon continued, "which, in this city, is most of them. You're removed from every charity board. Your membership to every club is revoked. Your name is on a list now, Mrs. Park, and that list means doors close when you approach them. Mrs. Park's husband rushed over, a short man sweating through his tuxedo, stammering apologies. Mr. Kang, please. My wife didn't know. She never would have. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. Please, we can make this right. Jiwon ignored him completely. He turned back to me and held out his hand. Let's go home. I took it. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong and certain. He helped me up from the floor, broken glass crunching under our shoes. Then, with my hand in his, he led me through the silent ballroom. 400 people watched us walk out. No one said a word. No one moved. They just stared as Kang Jiwon, the king of Seoul's underworld, claimed his fiancée in front of everyone who mattered. If you're still watching, if this story has gripped you the way it gripped my life, I need you to know something. This isn't just my story. It's the story of every person who's ever been invisible, who's ever been slapped down and expected to stay down. Hit that like button if you've ever felt invisible. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they matter. Subscribe, because there are more stories coming. Stories about people who refuse to accept what the world told them they were worth. Let's build something together. A community of people who see each other, who refuse to let others define their value. The ride back to his penthouse was silent. I sat in the back seat of his car, trembling. Not from fear, from shock, from adrenaline, from the weight of what had just happened. My entire life had changed in the span of 5 minutes. Everyone knew now. Everyone had seen. There was no going back to invisible. The driver, one of Jiwon's regular security team, kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Concerned, maybe, or just curious. I couldn't tell. Jiwon sat beside me, his hand holding mine, his thumb brushing across my knuckles in that way that had become familiar, comforting. He didn't speak, just held my hand and stared out the window at the city passing by. When we reached his penthouse, the building in Gangnam where I'd first driven him bleeding, he led me inside and straight to the bathroom. The space was all marble and glass, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul, luxury that still sometimes took my breath away. He cleaned the cut on my cheek himself. His hands, these massive hands that could probably kill a man without much effort, were impossibly gentle. He dabbed at the wound with antiseptic, his jaw tight, his movements careful and precise. "I'm sorry," he finally said. His voice was rough. "For what?" "For not protecting you sooner. For letting you work in a place where people could hurt you." His jaw tightened, muscles working beneath his skin. "It won't happen again." "Jiwon." I caught his hand. "I didn't know you owned all of that. The hotel, the event company, Mrs. Park's husband's business. When did you—" "I bought the hotel 2 years ago. The event company last year. Park Industries this afternoon." He met my eyes in the mirror. I'd been planning the park acquisition anyway. They were vulnerable, over-leveraged. When I saw you were working tonight, I expedited it. Just in case. Just in case what? Just in case someone hurt you and I needed leverage to destroy them. He said it so calmly, so matter-of-factly. Like destroying people's lives was a normal Tuesday activity. That's extreme. That's love. He turned me to face him. "You're mine, Zara. I don't share. I don't forgive. And I sure as hell don't let anyone put their hands on what's mine. I'm a person, not a possession. You're both." He cupped my face, careful of the cut. "You're the person I love more than anything in this world. And you're mine to protect, mine to cherish, mine to keep safe. Don't ask me to apologize for what I did tonight. I'm not sorry. The only thing I regret is that it took me 3 hours to buy Park Industries. If I'd been faster, I could have stopped her before she touched you." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me was horrified. Part of me was touched. Part of me, a dark, secret part, was thrilled. Everyone knows now, I said. Good. Jiwon, you said we needed to keep it secret. For my safety. I changed my mind. He helped me out of my uniform jacket, which was stained with champagne and my blood. I thought hiding you would protect you. But tonight, watching her hurt you while I stood across that room unable to stop it because I'd insisted we stay secret, that's when I realized I had it backward. He pulled the chain with the ring over my head, unclasped it, removed the ring. Then he knelt in front of me, the second time he'd knelt for me, and slipped it onto my finger where it belonged. Hiding you makes you vulnerable, but claiming you publicly, making it absolutely clear that you're under my protection, that makes you untouchable. No one will dare look at you wrong now, because they know what I'll do. What will you do? His smile was cold. Whatever it takes. The next morning, I woke up to my phone ringing. It was barely 7 a.m. Light was just starting to filter through the penthouse windows. Jiwon was still asleep beside me, one arm draped across my waist. My phone showed 47 missed calls, 73 text messages, hundreds of social media notifications. Every major news outlet in Seoul ran the same headline. Kang Jiwon publicly claims African fiancé at gala. Socialite banned. Park Industries acquired in strategic power move. My phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. I answered it, my voice rough with sleep. Zara? It was Tuya. Oh my god, are you okay? Is it true? Are you really engaged to Kang Jiwon? The Kang Jiwon? Tuya, how did you get this number? It's all over the news. There are photos everywhere. You and him leaving the gala. Hid the ring. Everything. Is it true? Yes. I glanced at Jiwon, who was awake now, watching me with those dark, calculating eyes. Yes, it's true. Holy shit. She was laughing, crying, something in between. You're engaged to the King of Seoul. You're going to be... Zara, do you know what this means? I'm still figuring that out. My former co-workers called, some congratulating me, others warning me to be careful. Most just curious about what it was like, what he was like. Was it true he'd bought an entire company just to fire Mrs. Park's husband? Not to fire him, I corrected. Jiwon isn't that petty. He bought it for strategic reasons. But the husband had been demoted. Significantly. That much was true. Strangers found my social media and flooded my messages with everything from marriage proposals to death threats. People I'd gone to school with in Nairobi suddenly remembered we'd been friends. Distant relatives appeared asking for money. My sisters called, worried and excited and confused. What's happening? My youngest sister asked. Why are there news articles about you? Who is this man? It's complicated, I told her. But I'm safe. I'm happy. I promise. Elite Events fired me. A terse email citing conduct unbecoming and bringing unwanted attention to the company. I laughed when I read it. Jiwon bought the company 2 days later and fired everyone who'd been in management. You didn't have to do that, I said. I wanted to. He was working from home that day, laptop open on the kitchen counter, running his empire in sweatpants and a t-shirt. They treated you like garbage for months. Now they know what it's like to be disposable. But Jiwon didn't flinch at any of it. He hired a security team for me, 4 men who rotated shifts, following me everywhere. It was suffocating at first, but I learned to accept it. This was my life now. I couldn't walk to the corner store without an armed guard 20 feet behind me. He held a press conference and confirmed our engagement. Stood in front of cameras and reporters and claimed me publicly, officially. Made it clear that I was under his protection, that I mattered to him, that anyone who wanted to harm me would have to go through him. I watched the press conference from the penthouse, my heart in my throat. He was asked if our relationship was real or strategic. It's real, he said, looking directly into the camera. Looking at me, even though I wasn't there. I love her. She saved my life. And I plan to spend the rest of mine making sure she never regrets saying yes. He shut down every negative article with a single phone call. I watched him work, watched the fear in journalists' eyes when he called their editors. This was power. Real power. The ability to shape narratives, control information, decide what people knew and what stayed buried. Doesn't it bother you? I asked one night. Using fear like that? No. He didn't look up from his phone, where he was reading another article about us. Fear is efficient. It's clean. I could threaten legal action, tie them up in courts for years, or I can make one call and the problem disappears. Which would you prefer? Neither. That's not an option, Zara. We live in the world as it is, not as we'd like it to be. And in this world, and I protect what's mine. And when Mrs. Park's family tried to apologize, when they sent gifts and letters and intermediaries begging for mercy, he refused to meet them. The gifts piled up in the penthouse lobby. Expensive wine, jewelry, artwork. Jiwon had them all donated to charity. The letters went unanswered. The intermediaries were turned away at the door. She hurt you, he said, when I asked if maybe he should ease up, maybe accept their apology. She hit you. She made you bleed. She humiliated you in front of 400 people. And she did it because she thought you were beneath her, because she thought there would be no consequences. So you're teaching her a lesson. I'm teaching everyone a lesson. Touch what's mine and your life ends. Not literally, though it could. But your life as you knew it? Over. Mrs. Park will spend the rest of her life apologizing to people who won't listen, because I've made it clear that accepting her means rejecting me. And in Seoul, rejecting me is suicide. Some people only learn through consequences, I said, remembering his words. Exactly. A month later, we were married in a private ceremony overlooking Seoul. It wasn't a fairy tale. I didn't become a princess. There was no white dress, no church, no hundreds of guests. Just us, an officiant, and 2 witnesses, Jiwon's lawyer and head of security. We stood on the same rooftop where he'd proposed, the city spreading out below us like a blanket of lights. I wore a simple white dress I'd bought myself. Jiwon wore a black suit. The officiant read the vows. We exchanged rings. His I already had. Mine he'd chosen, in a platinum band that matched my engagement ring. I love you, he said when it was his turn to speak. I'll protect you. I'll cherish you. I'll probably make mistakes because I'm not good at this, at being loved, at being someone's partner. But I'll try. For you, I'll always try. I love you, I said. Even the dark parts. Even the parts that scare me. All of you. And I choose you. Every day, I choose you. When the officiant said we were married, when Jiwon kissed me on that rooftop with Seoul watching, I felt like my life was finally starting. Everything before, Nairobi, the 3 jobs, the leaking room, the loneliness, all of it had been prologue. This was the story. This was real. We had dinner afterward at that same private restaurant where we'd had our first date. The owner brought out champagne, toasted to our happiness, which pretended not to notice that we were the only guests again. Thank you, I said to Jiwon over dessert. For what? For seeing me. For choosing me. For being willing to try. He reached across the table and took my hand. Thank you for stopping. For helping a stranger in a parking garage. For being brave enough to love a monster. You're not a monster. I am. But I'm your monster now. And that makes all the difference. It wasn't a fairy tale. Marriage to Jiwon was complicated, difficult, sometimes dangerous. There were nights when he came home late, his knuckles bruised, his eyes hard. Nights when he'd shut himself in his office, and I'd hear him on the phone speaking in that cold voice he used for business. Nights when I'd wake up alone and find him standing by the window, staring out at the city, looking haunted. There were phone calls he took in another room, conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. Men who visited the penthouse, Dangerous men with dead eyes who looked at me with barely concealed contempt. Meetings I wasn't allowed to attend. Decisions he made without consulting me. There were times when I questioned everything, when I wondered if I'd made a mistake, if love was enough, if I could really live in this world of violence and fear and moral ambiguity. But he kept his promise. He protected me. Not just physically. The security team, the bulletproof car, the panic button he'd installed in every room of the penthouse, but emotionally. He never let me doubt that I mattered to him, that I was loved, that I was chosen. He respected me. He listened when I spoke. He valued my opinions, even when they conflicted with his own. When I told him I wanted to work, wanted to do something meaningful with my life, he didn't try to stop me or convince me I didn't need to. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to help people like me, immigrants, women who come here with nothing and get chewed up by this city." "Then do it." I started a foundation for immigrant workers in Korea. Women like me who'd come here with dreams and hope, who worked 3 jobs and lived in rooms that leaked, who sent every penny home to their families, who were invisible and exploited and undervalued. Jiwon funded it without question, without asking for recognition or control. Within 6 months, we'd helped over 200 women find better jobs, better housing, legal assistance. We offered Korean language classes, job training, childcare services. We became a network, a community, on a lifeline. I named it Nia Foundation, purpose in Swahili, after what my mother used to tell me. Everyone has a purpose. Sometimes you just need someone to help you find it. The foundation became my life's work, the thing that got me out of bed in the morning. The thing that made me feel like all the pain and struggle and loneliness of those first 8 months in Seoul had meant something. I pushed Jawan to use his power for good, to think about legacy instead of just control, to consider what he was building, who it served, what it would mean in 20 years. "You have so much influence," I'd say. "What if you used it to actually help people? Not just protect your interests, but make the city better?" "I'm not a good man, Zara. But you could be better, couldn't you?" And he listened. Not always. Not every time. But enough. He started cleaning up his operations, cutting ties with the darkest parts of his empire, human trafficking, certain drug routes, loan sharking operations that preyed on the desperate. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't transformation. He was still Kang Ji-won, still dangerous, still feared. But it was change, and change was something. "I'm doing this for you," he said one night after a particularly difficult decision to shut down a lucrative but unethical operation. "Not because I've suddenly grown a conscience, because you asked me to, because making you proud matters more than making money. You have a conscience. You just buried it for a long time. Maybe." He pulled me close. "Or maybe I just love you enough to pretend." The city started to change too. Slowly, incrementally. Jiwon's influence meant that businesses that exploited immigrants suddenly found themselves facing unexpected inspections, license issues, mysterious financial problems. Landlords who rented unsafe housing to vulnerable people found their buildings mysteriously bought out by companies that actually maintained them. It wasn't legal, it wasn't clean, but it was effective. "You're becoming a vigilante," I teased. "I'm becoming your husband. There's a difference." And when people asked me if I was afraid of him, I told them the truth. No, because he's more afraid of losing me. That fear, I learned, could be a kind of power too. Not the power of violence or money or control, the power of being seen, of being chosen, of being loved by someone who thought they were too dark to love anyone. I think about that night at the gala sometimes. About kneeling in broken glass while 200 people stared. About the moment Jiwon walked through that crowd and changed everything. I used to be invisible. I used to be nothing in a city that eats people like me for breakfast. I used to scrub floors and serve champagne and accept humiliation because I thought that was my place in the world. Now I'm the woman who tamed a king. Not because I made him soft, not because I changed who he fundamentally was, but because I saw him fully, the darkness and the light, the violence and the tenderness, the monster and the man, and I chose him anyway. And he chose me back. People ask me if I regret it, if I wish I'd made different choices, if I'm scared of what it means to be married to someone like Jiwon. The truth? Some days are hard. Some days I wake up and remember the simplicity of my old life, when the worst thing that could happen was getting fired from a cleaning job. Some days I miss being invisible. But most days I wake up next to a man who looks at me like I hung the moon, who trusts me with his darkness, who built an empire but says I'm his greatest achievement, who would burn the world down if someone hurt me. And that's worth everything. If this story reminded you that you're stronger than the people who underestimate you, drop a comment and let me know. Tell me about a time someone counted you out and you proved them wrong. Tell me about the moment you realized you were worth more than what others said. And if you believe real love means seeing someone fully and choosing them anyway, the good and the bad, the light and the dark, the dreams and the demons, make sure you're subscribed. Because there are more stories coming. Stories about power and survival and the messy, complicated ways people find each other in the dark. Trust me when I say this. You won't want to miss them. Because the truth is, we're all invisible until someone decides we're worth seeing. And once you've been seen, really seen, you can never go back to being nothing. I know. I lived it. My name is Zara Kang now. And this is how a waitress from Nairobi became the Queen of Seoul. Not through violence, not through money, not through power, through love. And if you think love makes you weak, you've never loved someone who could destroy you but chooses to protect you instead. You've never stood beside someone while the world watches and whispers and judges, and felt them take your hand and refuse to let go. That kind of love? That kind of love makes you bulletproof. It makes you dangerous. It makes you everything you never knew you could be. So here's my question for you, the one I want you to carry with you after this story ends. Who sees you? Really sees you? Not the version you present to the world, not the mask you wear to survive, but the real you underneath. The scared you, the tired you, the you that's still fighting even when you want to give up. And more importantly, do you let them? Because I almost didn't. I almost ran. I almost let fear win. I almost walked away from the best thing that ever happened to me because it scared me, because it didn't make sense, because everyone said it was dangerous. But I stayed, and that made all the difference. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Thank you for seeing me, for hearing me, for understanding that love isn't always simple, but it's always worth fighting for. Now go out there and let someone see you too. You deserve it. We all do. And remember, you're not invisible. You're just waiting for the right person to notice. And when they do, when someone sees you and chooses you and fights for you, that's when your real story begins. This was mine. What's yours?